Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are at the 2039 All-Star break. Our Buffalo Wings are 50 and 38. That is good for a 3-game lead in the National League East over the Philadelphia Phillies. Several teams are ahead of us in the race for the best record in baseball. Over in the American League, we're trailing the Nashville Stars and the Baltimore Orioles, as well as the Minnesota Twins and the Texas Rangers. And even in the NL, the Rockies have a better record than us. So the sixth best record in baseball here at the All-Star break. We did our annual mid-year review in our last episode and also took a preliminary look at what's available on the trade market, and I don't see any obvious moves for us to make. We're clearly going to monitor things over the next 3 weeks. If we have a significant injury, that could make us much more likely to engage in some activity. But we've only got a little bit over $1 million to bring on contracts, so that is one challenge. And the other challenge is that we don't have huge holes on our team. If we could add a great outfielder with a great bat, that would certainly help us, kind of similar to what we did with Max Clark a year ago. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any Max Clarks available for a reasonable price this time around. But we will take a look, and we're going to keep an eye on the market. I did check in on our old friend Lorne Walborn, also known as the Traitorous Canadian. Actually, I should officially make that his nickname right now. I believe I spelled traitorous right. All right, the traitor. Oh, I may have spelled traitorous right. I'm not sure. I am confident I did not spell Canadian right, though. Riveting watching experience for those of you at the start of this episode. But I did check in on the Traitorous Canadian, and the Traitorous Canadian's having a fine year with the Dodgers. But we look at his profile right now, and I feel like we got the better of not bringing him back. Pretty happy with our new stopper. Walborn does have a 3.44 ERA on the year, but his Sierra is a bit higher than that. His FIP minus is 112, and he's actually been below replacement level. And if we were going to try to trade for him, you can see the only people the Dodgers are willing to give up for him are some of the top players in our organization. Now, I guess perhaps that is because of contract issues. If we got the Dodgers to keep a big chunk of that contract, then there are a lot more options for us to bring him back. The simplest would be one of the starting pitching prospects, Chris Lott or Josh Nagy. But I don't know that we need Walborn, and I don't know that I would take a dirty trader back onto my team, especially when, as I talked about, we've got Nate Ruckel now in that left-handed stopper role, and despite spending over 2 weeks on the IL for us, he has pitched 70 and 2/3 innings over 42 games, so he's done a pretty good job in the high-volume role that Walborn manned for us for the last 5 seasons. A bit above replacement level this year. ERA kind of in a similar area to Walborn's, but looking at his profile and looking at the fact that he's a couple years younger than Walborn and he's also making less money, I am happy that we no longer have the traitor on our team. And one thing that's come up in the comments to our previous episode, when I did dig in and we saw that our starting catcher, Andres Medina, is having a brutal offensive season with a 58 WRC+, were some suggestions to Perhaps bench Medina for Houlihan, do something to get Houlihan some more playing time. Some also felt that we should stick with Medina. When I do look at Houlihan at this point, with a little bit of, we think, potential regression in Medina's defense, we think that Houlihan is kind of equivalent to him, maybe even a somewhat better arm at this point. I haven't kind of rescouted my major league team this year yet, and you can see we're down to high scouting accuracy on some of those players. So not going to make any huge decisions in the near term, but I am going to kind of take the middle ground on the suggestions that were made about what we should do with Medina and Houlihan. I do think, looking at Medina's profile, he's a guy who's always going to strike out a ton, but he certainly doesn't have the profile of a guy who should have a 58 WRC plus. And you look at the course of his major league career, and he's never been anywhere near that range. His BABIP is more than 50 points below his career mark. I think he's just a guy who's gotten somewhat unlucky with the bat this year. So we're not going to take Medina out of the starting lineup. Taking a look at his splits, he is certainly better against left-handed pitching than he is against right-handed pitching. And Houlihan, who, as we've talked about in previous episodes, has been excellent defensively, is a left-handed hitter who is certainly more competent against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching, although with that career batting average of .323 at this point in 536 at-bats, he's been very competent against everybody. But Houlihan is also fragile in terms of his injury proneness. So what I am going to do, and what I have done, is I am going to play Houlihan every third day against right-handed pitching. Hopefully generate a little more offense, and it will be more playing time for Houlihan because Medina is durable and generally out there more than 2 games in a row before he needs a rest. Hopefully a little bit of rest and freshening will also help Medina in terms of his production. I think it's conceivable that he ends the year with a WRC plus a lot closer to 80 than the 58 that he's at right now. And given that we're 88 games into the season, that means he's got, in my view, a chance of being a kind of close to league average type offensive player over the rest of this season. So we'll see how that goes. As I said, we're not necessarily thinking we're going to do a ton at the trade deadline. Might be a year where we kind of stand still, which is a little disappointing in a way because we are a win-now team. We are generally a veteran team, but we just don't have a ton of money to spend. But we also don't have a ton of obvious holes to fill either. So it may be a quiet trade period and run up to the trade deadline for the Buffalo Wings here in 2039, unless we have some injuries. And our old buddy Shamar Jenneret, who is, some of you noted in the comments to the last episode, is having a monster season finally for Boston in his 3rd year away from the Buffalo Wings. Also won the Home Run Challenge All-Star Weekend. Not a great performance for our Buffalo Wings coming out of the All-Star break. We split a 4-game series at home against Atlanta. So as we head into the last 2 weeks of the month of July, and the final 2 weeks before the trade deadline, we're still up 3 on the Phillies. Juan Romero, our newcomer, is now tied for 2nd in the National League in homers. Seifu continues to lead the National League in stolen bases. And our ace, Alexis Barajas, is 3rd in the NL in earned run average. As you can see, Jenneret leading the National League, or the American League in homers, 2nd in ribbies, and also hitting .320. So he's not one of the top 3 batting averages in the league, but having a monster season, the type of season that we were pretty familiar watching him have for our team. As we head into those final couple weeks of the season, we have good news on the injury front. Center fielder Mike Broaden, who has not had a good year for us, is back and healthy. We had brought up the youngster Nelson Rojas while he was gone, and Rojas, as he did a year ago, continued to really struggle with major league pitching. Admittedly, it's a small sample size, 2 for 19, hit just 105, but certainly hasn't made us think that we have to keep him up at this point. We do think he can develop a little more home run power, get a little better at avoiding strikeouts. So we are going to send Rojas back down to Albany to ensure he plays every day and get Broaden back into the starting lineup against right-handed pitching. And we did have a better week, the first full week out of the All-Star break. Took our series at home against the Mets and then at Detroit. We did them both the hard way, losing the first game of each series before coming back to win the next two. But as we head into the final week of July, final week before the All-Star break, or before the trade deadline, we've expanded our lead to 4.5 on the Phillies. And we are 1 game behind the Rockies for the best record in the NL. And we've been perusing the trade market offline, feeling like we are doing it from a little bit of a position of weakness now after we were just swept on the road in Milwaukee. But fortunately for us, Philadelphia was swept in their series as well, so we do have a 4.5 game lead maintained on the Phillies. Investigating something that could be real interesting. I don't know if it's going to happen at a price that I will consider palatable, but we have been going back and forth on Kenny Levari of the Dodgers. He is a 37-year-old player, perennial All-Star and Silver Slugger winner who was the AL MVP a decade ago. He is fragile physically. He's making $45 million, but he's in the final year of that contract, and the Angels retained that entire contract when they traded him to the Dodgers this past offseason, hitting .314 with 23 homers and 71 ribbies. He's a third baseman / maybe first baseman, although he's never played first base at the major league level. Low leadership and work ethic, so not the best influence in the clubhouse. That said, this is a player with a 150 WRC plus over the course of his career who could certainly be a big-time boost for our lineup and our ability to score some runs. The issue is that the price for Mr. Levari is pretty expensive. You can see Guadalupe Amezcua, Devin Cabuto, and Jim Lance, 3 of the top prospects in our system, could get him, or Eric Barbarito, our young number 5 starter, Alexis Mendoza, our young number 3 starter, or Juan Romero, who joined us this past offseason and is our top offensive player, are the only ways that we can get Mr. Levari for a 2-month rental straight up, and those prices are too high for me. Have been exploring some options where we'd send a package of prospects to the Dodgers for Mr. Levari, but thus far the price has been more than I've been willing to pay. I've been going back and forth some more on this potential trade, and I think this response from Los Angeles, which is the second one we've gotten to them, is our best option to try to get this done, but we are giving up an awful lot for a 37-year-old player who is fragile, not the best influence in the clubhouse, and not exceptional defensively. But as I talked about, he is a 37-year-old player with a 150 career WRC plus who is a borderline Hall of Famer, or perhaps he's already a Hall of Famer at this point, quite honestly, with a close to 84 career WAR, having led the league in WAR 4 times, won an MVP award, perennial All-Star, many Silver Sluggers, as we said. So he's not a perfect player, but he's a very good bat. The issue is we have to give up a lot in return. Now, we have structured the deal so we're not giving up any of our top prospects, but we would be giving up a lot of prospects for a 2+ month rental. 18-year-old minor league pitcher Alejandro Ayala. He was an international amateur free agent signing 2.5 years ago. Don't see him being a big-time prospect, and he is already at the age of almost 19, dealing with an arthritic elbow. He has not been good in the DSL these last couple years. None of these players that I mentioned independently are deal breakers. It's just when you look at the sum of the talent that we're giving up for a rental, I struggle with it a bit. Although, as some of you have noted, I'm generally pretty willing to trade away prospects to try to add one player that I think can help us win in a given season. We'd also have to give up 23-year-old minor league center fielder Steve Duncan. Coincidentally, he's also a guy who's dealing with an injury right now. He was a 4th-round pick 3 years ago. Hit .317 with 10 homers and 183 at-bats in Double-A Utica before his season came to an end with that torn labrum. Has some speed, decent personality, but he looks like a borderline major league bat. Would not mind him as a 4th or 5th outfielder. Don't really view him as a starting outfielder, though. So, again, another guy willing to give up. 24-year-old minor league pitcher Tim Streets, a 4th-round pick from back in 2034. He's 24 years old. He's kind of been stuck at high A ball for us these last few years. Old enough that he could certainly get promoted to Double-A. Looks like he's never really going to have the control that we'd like to see for a major league pitcher. So again, not a huge prospect, but still a guy that could have some value. 23-year-old minor league second baseman Eric Wilson, who was a 6th-round pick in that 2034 draft. He's kind of stagnating in Single-A for us. Not really a major league bat. Does have some speed, does have some potential positional versatility, but not a huge prospect. 22-year-old minor league pitcher Nelson Velez, 12th-round pick in 2038. Great personality, but really no prospect of becoming a major league pitcher. We have him in A-ball this year. So again, those 5 guys, I'm willing to give them all up individually. Should I give up those 5 players plus something else for a rental is the question. And you can see they're going after some of the top prospects in our system or some of the better players in our organization to get the deal done. The guy that I would be most willing to put in is another pitcher, 21-year-old Dan Nicholas, who we picked in the 7th round in 2036. He's 8-3 with a 4.30 ERA this year in A-ball. Another guy with a good personality, a 21-year-old who throws in the high 90s. I think that his stuff with a potential 3-pitch arsenal should be good enough for the majors. His movement and control, both looking like they'll probably be average to slightly below. Do like that he's durable, good stamina, good at holding runners. Just don't think he's a frontline starter, but he could be a good, solid major league pitcher. So there's no one individually that's a deal breaker to me, but giving up 6 generally useful minor league prospects, a couple of whom will probably become solid major leaguers, and there's a chance one of them develops into a good major league player. For a guy that we're going to rent for 2 months, seems like a lot to me. Interestingly, I could throw in our backup catcher Houlihan, which would open up a spot for Berrios, who's in AAA, or I could throw in Berrios in AAA, which would kind of make me feel safe going with Houlihan and Medina for the next couple of seasons at catcher. But I think both of those guys are more valuable than Nicholas is. So 6 guys for a 2-month rental seems like a lot to me. This is one of the questions that I'd like to put out to the group in the middle of an episode. Or actually, I would like to put out to a group at the end of an episode. I don't like putting it out to the group in the middle of an episode because it feels like this episode needs to have a little more meat to it. I tend to think that the broad opinion is I'm probably giving up too much for a 2-month rental of an old and fragile player. But I am in it to win it. So I'm going to give it a little more time, let things stew here independently. I'll come back and I'll instantly let you know what I decided to do. But it's probably going to take me a little time to get to that decision. And as I think about this deal, the 2 guys I'm going to miss the most are the center fielder Tim Duncan. Not Tim Duncan. He's a center fielder, not a center. Steve Duncan, the center fielder who was a 4th-round pick. I like his range in the outfield. I like his speed. I like that he's a good bunter, above-average contact hitter, not going to strike out a ton. As I said, hitting .317 in a injury-shortened season in Double-A. But on a good team, he's a 4th or a 5th outfielder. I think this guy is definitely a major leaguer. I like the fact that he's a left-handed hitter who's got favorable splits against right-handed pitching. But he's still probably not a guy in a perfect scenario that you want as a starting outfielder. And then the other guy that is one of the 2 most valuable players to me is Nicholas. Great personality, durable pitcher, throws really hard. Hasn't figured out how to harness his control yet, but he's only 21 years old, so I think he will. Left-handed pitcher who looks like he could be a solid 4 or 5 starter. I don't think he's more than that, with the potential pretty average-ish to slightly below average movement and control. But his stuff could be pretty solid. We'll have a 3-pitch arsenal, likely when all is said and done. Good stamina, great at holding runners. But ultimately, best case scenario, I'm giving up a 4th starter and a 4th outfielder, and then maybe one other guy who turns into a roster player for a major league team for a few years. For a guy with a 150 WRC plus. And what really clinched it to me was taking an updated look at our team statistics. We've had the best pitching in the National League pretty consistently throughout this season. But our offense has been getting progressively more middle of the pack. We now rank 6th in runs scored. You can see over the last almost 2 months, we're a below 500 team. Now, we do continue to get unlucky because our Pythagorean record remains 5 wins better than our overall record. But we're trying to win it all this year. And I feel like adding a big-time bat can help us. I feel like I'm giving up a lot in terms of the volume. And as we talked about, potential good major league starter, a potential useful major league outfielder, and the odds are that an Ayala or a Streets or maybe a Wilson, probably less likely Velez, develops into a useful major league player or two as well. So I feel like we're giving up a fair amount for a rental, but we're not giving up any real top end talent. And I feel like our offense needs something here. So we're going to add Dan Nicholas into the deal. And we are going to go ahead and complete the trade to bring Kenny Levari into our clubhouse. The fans incredibly excited. You can see our old buddy Roman Maples, who we thought about drafting many years ago, out for 6 weeks with a strained groin, having a bit of a down year for him with Kansas City this year. But we've added one of the top bats in baseball, a veteran, former MVP, and hopefully a bat that can help lead us to not just 8th consecutive NL East and a 12th consecutive playoff appearance, but hopefully a better run in the playoffs than we've had these last couple years, because we've been knocked out in the division series each of the last 2 seasons, and it's time for this Buffalo Wings franchise to hopefully win it all, but at the very least win a playoff series this coming off season, and as I said, hopefully get back into World Series eventually. And I think that adding Levari can certainly help us do that. You can see right now the 253 average we have this year is the lowest we've had since 2032. So the offense needs a little help, and if we can keep Levari healthy, he can definitely provide it. Probably only going to play him against right-handed pitching. Not that he has dramatic difference in his splits. You can see he's a little better in terms of being able to draw walks against right-handed pitching, but more to just give him some intentional rest time, a game or two a week, hopefully when we're playing against left-handed pitching. We're also going to set up the strategy to bench him at some point when he's fatigued, say maybe 93%. We've got the 4.5 game lead in the division, so feel pretty confident that we were probably going to lead and win the division without him. So really the main goal to have him on board is to hopefully clinch the best record in the NL, possibly clinch the best record in baseball, but most importantly have a healthy Kenny Levari for when we get to the playoffs. And you can see adding him means that we've now got the top player in the National League in batter WAR and OPS, and the guy who's third in the batting race on our team. So although we gave up a lot to get him for a 37-year-old fragile rental, hopefully it's a move that helps propel us to some success in October. And to make room for Levari on the team, we're going to actually send Jorge Romero, the Rule 5 pick, back to the Yankees. He hit 255 for us in 47 at-bats, 2 homers, 6 ribbies, but he's a 25-year-old. He's a guy who's a 4th or 5th outfielder. I liked the opportunity to try to maintain his rights, but we are in it to win it this year, as I said, and I think he's the most logical player for us to move off of the Major League roster. So we say goodbye to him. We say hello to Levari, and we'll see how these last few games in July go before we hit the actual trade deadline. And in what will probably be another controversial decision on top of the trade that necessitated the release of a decent young Rule 5 acquisition, This trade also means that against right-handed pitching, we are sending the player who's led our team in homers and ribbies each of the last 2 seasons, Joe Gallagher, to the bench. Gallagher's been struggling this year, hitting just a .183, been a below average offensive player as our DH. Still going to have Gallagher playing DH against left-handed pitching, but he is somewhat less effective against right-handed pitching. He's certainly not Levari. Think that he'll be a very useful pinch hitter for us off the bench. He is headed into his first arbitration eligible year, and with the poor season he's been having, his numbers come down to $2.7 million. Kind of an odd move for a team looking to add offense and looking for help in offense to effectively bench the guy who's second on our team with 21 homers. But as I said, he's been a well below average offensive player this year. And when I look at our starting lineup against right-handed pitching, getting another left-handed bat in there with Levari, getting another right-handed bat out of the lineup in terms of Gallagher made sense to me. And the other right-handed bats in the lineup were Seifu, who we're not going to take out, Medina, who we are not going to take out, although we are playing him a little bit less, as we talked about. Juan Romero, our new cleanup hitter, who's having a great year for us. And then Joe Edwards, who is having a good solid season for us and also has some defensive value to us as a third baseman because of Edwards' better range and error ratings. That's why we kept him at third base over Levari. Levari certainly does have a better arm, but his range is materially less and his error rating is also lower. And also just in terms of keeping Levari healthy for his bat, felt that DHing him against right-handed pitching and then having him on the bench as a potential super pinch hitter against left-handed pitching is the way to hopefully ease him through the rest of this season. And our first 3 games with Kenny Levari on the team were very successful. We swept the Cubs at home to finish off the month of July and head past the trade deadline and into August. Taking a look at the standings, we are now 6.5 games up on the Phillies, and we are in a tie with both the Padres and the Rockies for the best record in the National League at this point. So hopefully the addition of Levari will help us. Has not played yet for us. He was banged up with that, I forget the minor injury that he had when he first joined us. But he is now completely healthy and ready to go, although he still remains fragile. Hopefully he will help us get past the Padres and Rockies for the best record in the National League over the next 2 months. And who knows, Nashville is going to be tough to catch. Looks like they are 9.5 games up on us for the best record in baseball, and the Brewers, Orioles, Yankees, and Twins in the National League all have better records than our Buffalo Wings as well. So seems like a year where we're unlikely to have the best record in baseball, but if we have the best record in the National League and we are able to get to a World Series, we'll be willing to take our chances, perhaps with 4 road games against one of those American League teams. Would just love to get a chance to get back in the Fall Classic. Hopefully the move that we made will help us get there. If you've got thoughts on what we did right, more likely what we did wrong, always interesting to hear about them in the comments section down below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, would appreciate it. And thumbs up always helps others find the channel, which we do appreciate. And we'll find out the success of some of these moves that we've made in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.